Hey everybody, Alex Miller at Capion here. I wanted to talk about the Apache Log4j S2 vulnerability, if you've heard about it. And I think there's some great storytelling about this type of vulnerability, the role similar vulnerabilities have played in the past. I have some very concrete takeaways for you to protect your organization. Hopefully, you already got this advice somewhere else, but you can get it from me if you need it. And then also, this is a great entry to some storytelling about why cybersecurity is hard, and with some mild to wild aspects, I would say that it has. So, kind of a theme here is that cybersecurity is really made of all these kind of dumb little things that we should really do all of consistently every single time. And sometimes we just don't do them because there's a lot of them and they're unevenly publicized and they don't always feel important. And this 4JS thing is an example, and I'll go into that kind of detail in a second. So let me get started with just the facts. This past couple of weeks, there was a vulnerability revealed in a piece of software called Log4j2s. This is software, you're building an application, it helps you keep logs, and it provides you an API for looking at those logs so you can get a sense of just how the thing is running, the context, etc. This is pretty important if you're building something complicated. So what does it mean it was discovered? There's actually an official list of these things if you've never heard of it. I'm going to have to read this off my notes here. It was CVE, and the V I believe is vulnerability 2021. That's the year 45046. So there's zillions of these officially recognized vulnerabilities. They are maintained by an organization called the MITRE Corporation under the sponsorship of the U.S. federal government. And exactly the purpose of this is to say, hey, somebody found a problem in this. We need to let everybody know so you can fix it and patch your systems, etc. It's pretty technical, exactly what this error is. It says when the login configuration uses a pattern layout with either a context lookup or a threat context map pattern. So I personally don't 100% know what that means. I've never used this piece of software. Apparently, this thread context map issue could enable a denial of service attack, which is a bummer. How does this intersect me? Just because I don't know what all of this means doesn't mean that this vulnerability isn't cooked into software that I use in a way that could be impactful. And in particular, I discovered, and maybe other users of some of the major cloud platforms, you log into the cloud platform and discover that you've got a little pop-up that says, hey, this server you're running has this vulnerability. Could you please tear it down and stand up a new one that has this patch in it that we applied because of this vulnerability that was announced? So if you haven't done this kind of thing yet, check what kind of IT assets you have, and a big organization should have a process for this already. Check them and make sure that this got fixed one way or another and that people are on top of it. Okay, so if I hadn't been aware, if I had never logged into my cloud consoles, if I hadn't been reading the news, if I didn't know about this, I've still got these servers out there that have this vulnerability in them. And the really dangerous thing here is that criminals read the news too. So cyber criminals know about this list of vulnerabilities, and once it comes out, after a while, they start looking for systems that are unpatched. And when they find an unpatched system, it's pretty much written down for them directly what to do to get into it. So what's the really famous example of this? The famous Equifax breach of 2017 involved a vulnerability in Apache struts. That vulnerability was announced on March 7th, 2017. And the attackers that eventually breached Equifax's systems in a big way entered via that vulnerability on May 12, 2017. So it's exactly the story of it was public 5 days earlier that there's this vulnerability and you should patch it. And people dragged their feet on patching it. And then there were people out there who know how to exploit this sloth, and the rest is history. Very plausibly, this Apache 4JS2, Log4JS2, kind of a mouthful, could be involved in something like this someday. There's a lot of people out there that have software that has this vulnerability in it. They might not have heard about it. They might not have patched it. And over time, especially if criminals get a couple wins off it, people are going to start looking for systems that haven't patched it, and they're going to be successful. So the really short takeaway is go make sure you've fixed this issue if you're responsible for that kind of thing. And then the higher level takeaway is that there's a lot of these things that happen all the time. It kind of merges into stuff like, do you have a sufficiently strong password? None of these are really that hard. Kind of keeping track of them and actually doing them all is something that we tend to fail to do, and we suffer for it.